Let the record reflect that the defendant is present along with counsel for the defendant, assistant state attorneys, both sides ready to proceed. I believe Mrs. Anthony is up for cross-examination. All right, let's have Ms. Anthony return to the stand. Okay, let's return to jury. State recognized presence of the jury. Defense.
Yes, sir. We do.
Members of the jury, I hope you had a good lunch. Did you heed all of my previous admonitions? Mr. Baez, you may proceed, sir.
May it please the court. Mr. Rain Burdick. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, Mrs. Anthony.
Hello.
Mrs. Anthony, is it fair to say you and Casey are very much alike?
In many ways, yes.
Okay. In fact, is that not what you hear quite often, that you are exactly alike?
In most ways, yes.
And you raised Casey to be a good person.
Yes, I did.
And you raised Casey to be caring
Yes, I did.
and loving as well.
Yes.
And you raised Casey to always tell the truth.
I thought I did. Yes, I did. I tried.
And you got to see what kind of mother Casey became, did you not?
Yes, I did.
And what kind of, can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what kind of mother Casey is?
Casey was a very loving, very caring mother. She had a very easy, quick maternal instinct that was very evident as soon as Kaylee was born. And she reminded me of myself when my kids were born, how just natural she was with Kaylee. And they were just great together.
And how did Kaylee respond to Casey?
Kaylee adored her mom. Her eyes would light up. She'd run to her and love on her. And in fact, Kaylee didn't want to sleep without her mom. Kaylee adored her.
Kaylee followed Casey everywhere she went, did she not?
Pretty much.
And would cry all the time, every time she left?
No, not when it was either George or myself, because she would cry a little bit, but she knew we were there, so it wasn't a big separation anxiety when I was there. Now, I didn't notice if I was already gone and Casey left her with one of her other sitters. I don't know how that was.
You never witnessed Casey abuse or torture Kaylee in any way, did you?
No, I did not.
And Kaylee never went without food or shelter or anything that she ever needed in life?
No, she had everything.
Now, you testified under direct examination that the first time you went to the or the first time Casey went to the doctor was on June 30th of 2005.
No, that was when...
I'm sorry, go ahead.
June 30th is when I found out that Casey was pregnant. To my knowledge, she went to the doctor a few days before.
And you went to your brother's wedding on June 7th, did you not?
Yes.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Without showing this to the jury, madam, I'm going to now show you Defense Exhibit A. Did you recognize that photo, ma'am?
Yes.
And is that a photograph of you and Casey at your brother Rick's wedding?
Yes.
And at that time, when that photograph was taken, you did not believe that Casey was pregnant.
No, I did not.
And at that wedding, you were actually confronted about Casey's pregnancy by your brother, were you not?
We were sitting at the dinner table, and Casey had flown in earlier that day, and she was sick and wanted to go lay down. And my brother asked if she might be pregnant, and I told him no. I did not believe so.
So you were confronted by your brother at that time?
He brought the subject up that she might be pregnant, and my parents and my husband and I were there. And
at that time, you told him, no, she was not.
At that time, yes, I told him, no, we did not believe that she was pregnant.
And George was present during this conversation.
Yes.
And both of you indicated that Casey was not pregnant.
Correct.
And you mentioned under direct examination that Casey, during that time period, was sedentary.
Pretty much so. I mean, for her work, previously she was walking the entire park at Universal, doing photos and such, and then she had taken a sedentary position in human resources. Her and I would walk, but she wasn't running or walking all day. We'd walk in the evening for a few minutes, but to me that's still sedentary.
Miss Anthony, if you can just answer my question, I'd appreciate it. The question was, you had testified that she was sedentary. Is that correct? Okay. And for those of us who don't know what that means, that basically means lack of physical activity, correct?
Yes, that you pretty much have a sit-down job.
And are you certain it wasn't that she didn't get these? Well, let me strike that and ask you this. Are you certain it wasn't because she was overly active or participating in sports that she got that way?
What way, sir? I don't understand the question.
With the large protruding belly, are you certain that it wasn't because she was participating in sports?
Casey wasn't participating in sports during that time.
Okay. So it's the complete opposite. It's because she was not engaging in physical activity. That you thought that way?
Yes, at that time, yes.
Now, you're aware that Casey has been incarcerated for the last 3 years, are you not?
I've been aware every day of my life for the last 3 years, yes, sir.
Okay. And you're aware that she spends 23 hours a day in a cell?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That would pretty much classify her as sedentary during that time period. Would you not agree?
Yes, sir.
As you see Casey today, does she have a large belly or a protruding belly?
I haven't been close enough to see her, but I know she's not eating, so I don't know what activities she's allowed or can do.
Your Honor, may I ask Miss Anthony to please stand with your permission so that Mrs. Anthony can identify her?
Approach. The defendant may stand.
Mrs. Anthony, can you see your daughter?
I can see just from her chest up.
May the witness stand down, Your Honor.
She may.
Can you please look at your daughter and then go back to the witness stand once you've had an opportunity to view her? Does your daughter appear to have a protruding belly as she did at your brother's wedding?
She's not as big as she was during that period of time, no.
Now, I'd like to ask you some questions about when Casey actually did go to the doctor. Okay?
Okay.
Now, she went on, you said you think she went a couple days before the 30th.
She told me she went a few days before. Casey was having some female issues, and we were concerned that she might have an ovarian cyst. She was bloated, she was hurting, she was not feeling well, and her periods were more often than normal. So I had implored her to go to see the doctor, and she told me that she had gone earlier that week to see the doctor.
And she eventually was referred to a Dr. King, was she not?
That was on her, after her second visit, from my understanding.
And that was a gynecologist.
Yes,
And that was the first time that she had actually seen a gynecologist, correct?
yes,
And she was 19 at the time.
yes,
Now, you've testified that your daughter had irregular periods
yes,
and that you thought that she might have had a cyst.
yes.
And when did Casey first get her period?
When she was 12. Actually, excuse me, when she was 10.
She was 10. And from the age of 10 to the age of 19, being a medical professional, you never considered taking her to a gynecologist.
Going to a gynecologist is pretty traumatic for a child. I remember I didn't go till I was like 17 or 18 years old. No, I considered it, but she wasn't having issues that weren't what I considered pretty much like me. When you compare that her and I are a lot alike, we're a lot alike in that way as well with our periods.
Despite the fact that she was having irregular periods?
That just started just a few months prior to me finding out she was pregnant.
Do you know when she had her first sexual partner?
First of all, please don't.
Now, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about some of Casey's imaginary friends. First of all, let me ask you this. Who's Kaylee's father?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. Any knowledge will be based on hearsay.
Overruled to the extent that the answer comes from Casey Anthony. If it comes from someone other than Casey Anthony, you can't answer the question.
When Casey first told me she was pregnant, naturally, the first thing I asked her is who the father was. And she, at that time, told me that it was Jesse Grunt.
Now, you didn't wait till Kaylee was born to ask her who the father was.
No. I
You asked her right away?
Right away, yes.
Because that's what a concerned parent would do.
Yes.
And there came a time where you found out that Jesse Grun was not Kaylee's father. Did you not?
Yes.
And subsequent to that, who did you think Kaylee's father was?
She gave me a name of Eric Baker.
And did you ever meet anyone by the name of Eric Baker?
No, sir, I have not.
Did Casey what did Casey tell you about this Eric Baker?
That he was 2 years younger than her, and that he... Your Honor, I'm going to object to any further hearsay on this issue.
Well, Miss Anthony, as long as you're telling us something that your daughter told you.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Please continue.
He was 2 years younger than her, and he was an old friend, and she had seen him about the time that she started seeing Jesse. He was in town and upset about a girlfriend or such, and then I guess they got together. It was one night, and Eric lived out of state and was back in a relationship with his girlfriend that he was having difficulty with when Casey said they got together.
And what state was he from?
I'm pretty sure she said like Kentucky, North Carolina, somewhere there.
And at this point, did you make any attempts to meet Eric Baker?
No.
Did you want to speak to Eric Baker at any time?
No.
Did Casey tell you that she wanted you to meet Eric Baker?
No.
Did there come a time where meeting Eric Baker was not possible?
Yes.
And how did that all come about?
It was about a week or two after Kaylee's second birthday that Casey called me at my work, and she was hysterical on the phone. And she told me that Casey's father was involved in a car accident. And she had just found out. And she also told me at that time that Kaylee had a half-brother.
And what is Kaylee's half-brother's name?
I have no idea.
Is Eric Baker on Kaylee's birth certificate?
No, no father's listed on Kaylee's birth certificate.
Now, do you think Eric Baker exists?
I'm going to object to her opinion,
Clark,
to any opinion, testimony.
sustain.
Do you have any evidence that Eric Baker is Kaylee's father?
Objection would be based on any hearsay.
Sustain.
Do you have any evidence that Eric Baker ever existed?
Next question,
Objection.
Mr. Baez. Objection is sustained.
Tell me about Jeff Hopkins. You've testified quite a bit about him during direct. He is a wealthy man.
Do you want me to tell you how I learned about him? Or
Sure.
Casey was engaged to Jesse, and it was sometime around Valentine's Day of 2006. And she was telling me, this is about the time Casey was starting to vocalize issues of her and Jesse's relationship. And she started telling me about this young man that she worked with that was an IT at Universal. Actually, I guess he worked for Nickelodeon Studios at the time. And he had a little boy, and she said that she thought he was a nice young man, and he had befriended her, and she was confiding in him about her relationship with Jesse.
Did Casey tell you these things on pretty much a daily basis, or is this all information you heard on one day?
No, this is over the course of a period of time. I mean, I heard about Jeffrey Hopkins from that point on through, Kate, until I found out about Kaylee.
And Jeffrey Hopkins had a child named Zachary.
Yes.
And did you ever see a photograph of Zachary?
I saw a picture of Zachary and Jeffrey on Casey's cell phone months later. It was probably towards the fall or winter of 2006 that when Casey's phone was on, I guess was just sitting there, the picture was of Zachary and Jeff, and she had him listed as boyfriend in her phone.
Have you since come to find out that Jeffrey Hopkins does not exist?
I never knew for sure if he did or not, so if you're telling me that he doesn't exist now, then
Are you aware that law enforcement looked for him?
yes.
And are you aware that no such Jeffrey Hopkins ever worked for Universal Studios?
It's based on.
Sustained.
Do you have any evidence, other than the photograph that you saw, that there ever was a Jeffrey Hopkins?
Same basis.
Sustained.
Do you ever speak to Jeffrey Hopkins?
No.
You had, that you testified under direct, a girls' day at the mall with Jeffrey's mother?
We were supposed to meet up with Jeffrey's mom and Zachary for Christmas pictures with Santa Claus, Christmas of 2007.
And what was Jeffrey's mother's name?
Jules.
Jules. And did you ever speak to Jules?
No, I did not.
Did you ever see a photograph of Jules?
No, I did not.
Did you ever have a phone number for Jules?
Yes, I did.
Did you ever call it?
No, I never had the opportunity where I needed to.
Now, it turned out that Jules had cancer.
Casey told me that those last few weeks in July of 2008 that Jules had cancer.
And did you get an invitation to go to her wedding?
No. As my understanding, it was an impromptu thing that just occurred that week.
Do you know if Casey got an invitation to go to her wedding?
Casey told me that she was attending Jules' wedding and that was delaying her from coming home from Jacksonville.
And it turns out that Zach's mother was also deceased.
Yes.
It's your understanding that Jeffrey Hopkins was how old compared to Casey?
How old?
Yes. Were they the same age, Casey and Jeffrey Hopkins?
No, I believe Jeffrey was at least 2, if not 3 or 4 years older than Casey.
And they both had children who were approximately 2 years of age.
No, Zachary was a year older than Kaylee.
They both had toddlers,
Yes.
and both of these toddlers' parents, other parents, were deceased.
Yes.
So Jeffrey Hopkins was a widower.
My understanding is that Jeff took custody of Zachary when he was 2, that Zachary's mother, previous to that, was a single mom, and Jeff had no idea that he was a father, and then found out when his old girlfriend passed away that he actually was a father.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is Zachary's mother was deceased. Yes.
Yes.
And Kaylee's father was deceased.
Yes.
And Casey wanted to move in with Jeffrey Hopkins and the 2 children together.
At some point, I believe that that's Casey's wishes.
And that's what Casey had dreamed of.
That's what Casey, told me that was what she would like to do someday.
Were there ever any plans set in place to make this family happen?
There were lots of plans that we were supposed to get together with him and meet him and his family, and that never happened.
In fact, there was one time where you guys planned a barbecue.
There were several times that we planned things, and something always came up that we never got to meet him.
Do you recall planning a barbecue?
Not specifically a barbecue, but I remember we're supposed to go to SeaWorld and different things.
And when did those plans get canceled? Were
Always
they the
a-
day of or the day before?
Always the day of.
The day of. And did you ever have a situation where you went out and bought food because you were going to meet Jeff?
Yes.
And you had planned a dinner that you were going to prepare, or barbecue or anything like that?
There was lots of times when I thought he was going to come over that I would either make a cake or something. You know, if I knew I did that for all of the kids' friends. If someone new was coming, I always tried to have food, and, you know, you don't want someone over to your house sitting there unprepared.
And did you share this with people, this information of this wonderful guy that named Jeff Hopkins?
Absolutely.
You told your coworkers?
Yes.
Did it ever occur to you, Cindy, that these people weren't real?
No, sir.
And this was long before June 16, 2008, wasn't it?
Correct.
And you had heard these stories of these imaginary people for quite some time.
I did not know they were imaginary people.
I know that, but you had heard these for quite some time.
Yes.
Juliette Lewis, who is she?
I was told she was a coworker of Casey's through not only Universal Studios, but also someone she worked with at Hard Rock Cafe.
And did you ever speak to Juliette Lewis?
No, I did not.
What does she look like?
I could only tell you a description that Casey gave me. I've never seen her.
And why did she describe her to you?
I remember one day we were sitting in Universal parking lot waiting for her boss and Juliette to arrive, because I was volunteered to help Casey with a fundraiser.
And how long did you wait for Juliette before she never showed up?
Hour and a half.
Did you call Juliette?
No, Casey called Juliette.
And did you ever have an opportunity to speak to Juliette?
No, sir.
Do you have any evidence or any knowledge as to whether Juliette Lewis ever existed?
The only thing I remember, Kaylee, when I'd ask her about Juliette's daughter, Annabelle, Kaylee would repeat the name Annabelle like it was familiar to her. So.
And how would Kaylee mention Annabelle?
If I would say to Kaylee that day before I go to work or whatever, if I knew that Casey was going to see Juliette and Kaylee might see Annabelle, because sometimes Zanny was supposed to have watched Annabelle for Juliette as well, I would say, "You're going to play with Annabelle today," and her eyes would light up and she would say, "Annabelle."
She would just repeat the name.
Yes.
How old was Annabelle?
The same age as Kaylee.
Did you ever see any photographs of Annabelle?
No, sir, I did not.
Did you ever have any play dates with Kaylee and Annabelle?
No.
Who is Raquel Farrell?
I believe Raquel Farrell to be Zanny's roommate.
And what does she look like?
I've never seen Raquel.
Did you ever speak to Raquel Farrell?
No.
Did you ever see a photograph of Raquel Farrell?
No.
Do you have any evidence that Raquel Farrell ever existed?
No.
Is Raquel Farrell the one that worked at Fridays?
I don't know where Raquel Farrell worked at.
Now, I'd like to talk about Zanny the nanny. Did you ever see a photograph of Zanny the nanny?
No.
Did you ever speak to Zanny the nanny?
No.
When was the first time you heard of Zanny the nanny?
The same time I heard about Jeffrey Hopkins. around Valentine's Day of 2006.
This was 2 years, over 2 years, and basically 2.5 years before June 16, 2008.
Yes, sir.
And what did Casey tell you about Zanny the nanny?
She didn't call her Zanny the nanny, by the way. She called her Zanny, and she said that that was Jeff's girlfriend, and that they lived in the same apartment complex. And Jeff pretty much offered Zanny up as a extra person if Casey ever needed a babysitter, because at that time it was her girlfriend Lauren and the Gruns, or George and I, that was watching Kaylee those hours that my schedule overlapped with Casey's.
And you had no idea that Zanny was not a real person.
No, I did not.
And she described to you that Zanny looked like what?
Over the course of the 2 years, Zanny had gotten her hair cut several times, but when I first heard about her, she had long black hair and was very attractive.
Did she say she was a perfect 10?
That came up later. I didn't hear that prior, right in the beginning. I heard that she just was a beautiful person on the inside as well as the outside and had a great smile.
Was Zanny Hispanic?
I don't think the conversation ever came up. I don't think I ever asked. That was not a qualification for Casey's friends or anybody to babysit Kaylee.
Did Zanny the nanny speak Spanish?
Possibly. Casey spoke some Spanish. She took, I believe, 3 years of Spanish in high school.
And did Zanny the nanny teach Kaylee how to count in Spanish, or was that Casey that did that?
I believed it was between Zanny, Casey, and Dora the Explorer that Kaylee was able to speak Spanish and count.
How would Casey prepare on a daily basis to pack up and take Kaylee to Zanny the nanny?
I was never home to see her pack for Kaylee to take her to Zanny's, so I could not tell you that.
Were you there when they came home?
Yes.
And did Kaylee appear to be excited from spending the day with Zanny the nanny?
When Kaylee either would come through the door or I would come through the door, the first thing was we would run to each other, and it didn't matter what Kaylee did for the day. It was what her and I were going to do with the rest of the day. So we really never talked about that.
But surely you asked her, did you have a fun day? Or?
Oh, yes. There was one occasion where I was actually kind of concerned that Kaylee had some scratches on her legs, and I thought that they looked like cat or dog scratches. And I asked her what had happened to her. And she said a doggy had scratched her. So I asked Casey about it, and she said that Zanny had gotten a new puppy, and the puppy had scratched Kaylee.
What was the puppy's name?
I don't recall.
And were there ever times? Well, let me ask it this way: how often throughout the week for almost 2 years did Kaylee stay with Zanny the nanny?
Not that often. Most of the time, there was weeks at a time where Kaylee wouldn't stay with anybody other than myself. Zanny was someone that filled in. If Casey had to work while I was at work or George was unavailable. Otherwise, most of the time, Casey dropped Kaylee off at my work or would meet me in the parking lot, and then I would have Kaylee in the evenings.
Did Casey ever describe, prior to June and July of 2008, did Casey ever describe any problems that Zanny the nanny was having in her life, in her personal life?
Just that period of time. Well, there were different times during those 2 years where Zanny had to move. She talked to me about Zanny's mom being ill and different things like that. And Zanny had another part-time job and she just babysat. And I guess when her and Jeffrey broke up, Zanny got a job as a bartender to fill in financially from not being able, making money from, watching Zachary. So, there was different, she would talk to me about Zanny's life like she was one of her friends, and that's what she considered her, and that's what I considered her to be, is a friend of Casey's at that point.
And did Zanny's mother have cancer too?
No, sir. She had heart issues.
Heart issues?
Yes, sir.
And what was her name?
If I'm not mistaken, I believe it was Gloria.
Okay. Who is Rosa?
I have no idea.
Okay. Now, Zanny had a sister, did she not?
Yes.
And what was Zanny's sister's name?
I did not find out about Zanny's sister until after July of 2008.
What was Zanny's sister's name?
Samantha.
And was she older or younger than Zanny?
I believe she was older.
Was Samantha also a nanny?
No, sir, I don't believe so.
Did she live with Juliet and Raquel and Zanny together?
Juliet did not live with Zanny.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And as far as I know, her sister was either married or lived on her own with her children.
Did you ever see a photograph of Gloria, Zanny's mother?
No, sir.
Did you ever speak to Gloria to wish her well on her heart condition?
No, sir.
Do you have any knowledge, or did you have any knowledge that Gloria was an imaginary person?
No, sir.
What about Samantha?
I never had the opportunity to meet Samantha. I did not know about Samantha until after July of 2008.
What did Casey tell you about, or what information do you have about the uncomfortableness of Zanny and Jeff Hopkins being former boyfriend and girlfriend, and Casey now wanting to marry and move in with Jeff Hopkins?
Object to the relevance of this, Your Honor.
Sustain.
I'll just sum this up, Miss Anthony. Do you have any information that you've received over the last 3 years or since these people ever were mentioned that they are anything but imaginary people?
I just found out that they are imaginary people.
And you testified under direct examination that up until about 6 weeks ago, you were looking for Zanny the nanny.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
And that was for 3.5, or for 2.5 years, you were looking for Zanny the nanny?
I was looking for Zanny ever since I found out that Kaylee was missing.
And what efforts did you engage to try and find Zanny the nanny?
We had tip lines. We looked up every Zenaida Fernandez or Zenaida Gonzalez or Zenaida Rodriguez or whatever came close that was in the state of Florida, New York, North Carolina. George and I, when we were in New York, even followed up on a tip and went to the apartment that we believed that she lived in.
Was this at George's urging or yours?
At mine and George's when he found out that she was in New York or could be in New York.
Well, this was something that you really wanted to pursue?
This is something we both wanted to pursue. When I got the tip that with a physical address, I mean, we went to California to follow up on her.
Did you find Zanny the nanny in California?
No, we did not. But we had met a couple that was pretty convinced that she was possibly at a restaurant that they had seen Kaylee.
You hired someone by the name of Dominic Casey, did you not?
I never hired Dominic Casey. Dominic Casey worked for you. And when you and Mr. Casey had a falling out, he volunteered to continue to follow up on tips for Kaylee.
And he did that for you?
Yes.
And I believe you once made a statement that somebody was being watched in Puerto Rico.
Yes, sir. Mr. Casey thought that Kaylee might be in Puerto Rico.
Your Honor, I'm going to object on hearsay and relevance.
Sustained.
As to relevance, Your Honor, this was brought out during direct examination as to some of the methods that...
Your hearsay.
I understand that. May I inquire in another manner?
You can ask another question, but
Yes, sir.
objection sustained.
Did you order your private investigator at the time to follow someone in Puerto Rico?
Yes, I had received a tip.
That objection again, Ms. Burke.
Relevance and hearsay.
Sustained as to relevancy.
Did you hear that, or let me rephrase that, did you ever become aware or did you ever believe that Kaylee was flown by a private jet to Puerto Rico?
Sustained. Another subject.
Yes, sir. Let's go back a little bit further in time. I'd like to talk about Casey's high school graduation. When did you first find out that she was not graduating?
Relevancy sustained.
Your Honor, I think some of this was brought out during direct examination, not the specific time.
Sustained.
Now, Mrs. Anthony, throughout all of these years, it never occurred to you that these stories and these people that Casey was talking about were not real.
No, sir.
So therefore, the reason during the 30 days that you had not seen Kaylee, you understood all of these things to be true just as the imaginary people?
I trusted Casey. She'd never given me any reason not to believe in her.
So the answer is yes. The reason you believed in Casey was because certainly you had no knowledge that all of these people were imaginary, and Casey had no reason or no issues that would lead you to cast doubt on what she was telling you.
Objection asked and answered.
Sustained.
Did there come a time where you told law enforcement that you thought Zanny was Amy Huizinga or Jesse Grund?
Object to the relevance. Hearsay.
Overruled.
Yes.
And why did you think that Zanny the nanny was Amy Huizinga or Jesse Grund?
Well, actually, when I spoke to the FBI about it, I wasn't convinced that it was Amy, more like it might be Ricardo Morales. And when I was bringing up the information to the FBI, it was Scott Boland who put the Zanny and Huizinga correlation together.
So you think that the FBI is the one that thought Zanny, the nanny, was Amy Huizinga?
Object to relevance and then her opinion on the issue.
Sustain as to opinion.
Why did you think Zanny, the nanny, was Jesse Grund?
I never said that I thought Zanny was Jesse Grund.
Can you explain why you told law enforcement that you thought Zanny was?
Sustained a while ago in a different form, Mr. Baez.
Yes, sir. Have you ever testified that you gave the sheriff's department Zanny's number?
Yes, I did.
And did you give law enforcement Zanny, the nanny's phone number?
I gave one of the deputies on July 15th or the morning of July 16th what I thought was Zanny's phone number.
And as far as you know, that number was never followed up on? What happened with that number?
From my understanding, that number was not to a Zenaida Gonzalez. It was to one of Casey's other friends.
Which police officer did you give Zanny, the nanny's phone number to?
The officer that was in charge that evening.
Would that be Sergeant Hosey?
Yes, sir.
Mrs. Anthony, do you believe Kaylee's alive?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to the relevance of this.
Sustain.
I'd like to talk to you, Miss Anthony, about your home.
Yes.
Okay. We saw photographs of the inside of your home. Do you recall those?
Yes.
You have white carpet,
It's like a cream color carpet.
and we saw photographs of the sliding glass door that goes out towards the pool.
Yes.
And there is no bar that would prevent Kaylee from opening that door.
We never placed a bar there, no.
And there's no child safety lock or anything like that for that door.
No, Kaylee had difficulty opening the big door.
Okay. Have you ever testified that Casey would get out quite easily?
Casey could, yes.
I'm sorry, Kaylee could.
I may have.
Okay. And that's what led you to believe that Kaylee could have drowned in the pool, did it not?
I don't know if I put those in the same sequence.
But it was your opinion that the number one thing that you thought could have happened was Kaylee drowning in the pool.
Sustain.
Opinion.
How many times did you tell law enforcement about Kaylee possibly drowning in the pool?
I have sustained objection to that question, so move on to another area, please, sir.
The day, within 24 hours of law enforcement getting called, Miss Anthony, did you not tell Detective Melich about the ladder incident?
I'm not sure what ladder incident you're talking about.
About finding the ladder down attached to the pool on June 17th?
The facts not in evidence.
Overruled.
I know at some point I remember telling the detectives that the ladder, I found the ladder on the pool and the gate open
And that was on June 17th, was it not?
I believe it was the 16th. Could have been the 17th, but I feel like it was the 16th.
So the 16th, you came home from work and you saw the ladder there.
And I came home from work and let the dogs outside. And when I went outside with the dogs, I noticed that the ladder was on the pool. And when I walked to get the ladder off the pool, I noticed that the side gate was open.
And that alarmed you.
Yes, because the dogs were in the backyard and I didn't want them running into the street, and we never left the gate open.
And this alarmed you so much that the next day when you went to work, you actually told coworkers.
Yes, sir.
You told Debbie Bennett about someone who was swimming in your pool.
I had called George that night and asked him if he had worked in the yard and could have potentially left the gate open, and did he cool off in the pool before he went to work. And he said no. And from my knowledge, Casey had not been back home that afternoon. So if it wasn't Casey or George, then it had to be someone else.
My question, ma'am, was that you told Debbie Bennett that someone was swimming in your pool.
Yes, sir. I just answered that saying that it wasn't one of us, so I thought it could be someone else.
I understand. You also told Debbie Polisano that someone was swimming in your pool.
Possibly, yes.
Okay. And are you close with Debbie Polisano?
She was my supervisor for a year and a half before I left Gentiva.
So is that a yes or no?
She was my boss. We weren't friendly. Debbie Bennett and I hung out after work. Deborah Polisano and I never hung out after work, so I don't really call being close with her. No.
Did you tell anyone else at work about the ladder being attached to the pool on June 16, 2008?
My work is very open, so if I was talking to Debbie, then pretty much the whole office probably could have heard me speaking to Debbie Bennett.
Okay. Now, Kaylee loved to swim, did she not?
Yes, she did.
In fact, when you were on vacation, you guys went swimming every day
Which vacation, sir?
in June of 2008.
Yes, from my second day of vacation, yes.
And you always used the protective vest when going
Yeah.
swimming with her.
Yes, I would take it off before we get out of the pool most of the time because Kaylee liked to get her suit off and go by the jets before we get out. If it was just her and I, I'd leave the vest on, but if someone else was with us, then we would strip her down and someone would get her with the towel and take her in.
I heard you say she liked to swim naked.
Well,
Or-
the jet from the pool, we had a little thing. She liked to go over to it and feel it. So,
Who doesn't?
yeah, it feels good on your back and your bottom. So, yes.
Now, did you ever advise law enforcement that you thought maybe Casey forgot to take the ladder down?
I don't recall. I could have. If Casey had the opportunity to come home to swim, she may have.
Now, I know you testified that that you went swimming with Kaylee June 15th, 2008,
Yes.
and that it was almost in the evening that the two of you got out of the pool.
Yes, it was the sun was, it was getting later in the evening, and it was getting kind of chilly in the pool. And we had been in the pool for at least an hour and a half. It was probably about 7 o'clock, 7:30.
And I know you testified that you took the ladder down after you were done.
Yes, I recall taking the ladder down.
Are you 100% certain of that?
As certain as I can be. I'm not sure if anybody's ever 100% certain of anything, but I do recall taking the ladder down. So as much as I can remember from the events, yes, I took the ladder down.
And of course, you would never have to recall this specific event until well after a month later.
No, actually, it would have been the next day when I questioned whether or not someone was in the pool. So within a day, I would have
That's right.
remembered.
Now, do you recall speaking with, after this case is over, with two men, one by the name of Steph Watts? Do you know who he is?
I know who he is, but I don't know what you're referring to as after this case is over. I don't think this case is ever.
He works for Fox News, or worked at that time for Fox News
At what time are you referring?
in July of 2008.
Yes, I remember Steph Watts being one of the media personnel outside my home, one of many.
And do you recall ever meeting a man by the name of Mark Furman?
Yes, I do.
And he is that police officer from the O.J. Simpson case, is he not?
He was a police officer during the O.J. Simpson case, yes.
Do you remember letting both of these gentlemen into your home?
Yes.
Do you remember speaking to them about this case?
I remember Mr. Furman wanted to speak to us and offer any help that he could with his expertise as a detective.
Now, he's not a detective, though, is he?
Well, not at that time he wasn't.
And he is now a member of the media, is he not?
At that time, I actually found out after speaking with Mr. Furman that he was actually working on behalf of Greta Van Susteren. I didn't realize that at the time when we invited him in our home.
And did you give both of them a tour of your backyard?
Yes.
Did you tell Steph Watts and Mark Furman that you forgot to take the ladder down?
No, sir, I did not.
Now, on June 16, 2008, Casey attempted to call you around 4 p.m., did she not?
Yes, there were several attempts that Casey was trying to reach me that afternoon.
In fact, there was an abnormal amount of calls to you, unsuccessful calls.
At that time, I didn't know it was an abnormal amount. It was a Monday afternoon, and Mondays are very busy for me, and I was getting ready for a meeting, which a lot of my information on my projects were being discussed. So I remember coming out and knowing that she had called me around 4 o'clock.
Mrs. Anthony, I know that a lot of this in hindsight, but at the time, I totally understand the difference of your knowledge. But at that time, around 4 p.m. on that afternoon, there were numerous calls, unsuccessful calls from Casey to you in that afternoon, were there not?
Am I to answer, did I know at that time or now?
Now, do you know
Yes,
that right
I
now?
know that now.
Okay. Now I'd like to talk to you about July 15th of 2008. You testified that several days earlier on the 13th of July, let's focus on the 13th, is the day you found the certified letter on your door,
I found the notice that alerted us to a certified letter.
the notice.
Yes.
Is that common for you to receive the certified notice on your door as opposed to in your mailbox?
We have a community mailbox that's a few doors down from us, and I don't think they're allowed to put those kind of notices in the community mailbox, so that they're supposed to put them where a person can see them readily.
So whenever you get the notices in the mail for certified letter, it's always on the door, never in the mailbox.
I've never received a certified notice in our mailbox, no.
And you testified that you received it on the 13th of July,
Yes, it was a Sunday afternoon.
and that you thought the notice said 10th or 11th of July.
On the notice, it gives you, there's a date, there's several things on the notice. It tells you where to go pick it up. There's a box that says there's a place where the postman can write when he puts it down, and I believe the date that was handwritten on there that he put it on our door was either the 10th or the 11th, which would have been, I guess, Thursday or Friday.
When you called the police on July 15th, 2008, what day did you tell them you found that notice on your door?
When I called the police,
Yes.
I don't think I talked about the notice when I called the police. I talked about getting this stuff from the car. The notice about the car, the certified letter, is probably what I was referring to and not the notice. That we got the notice that day.
Okay, so do you recall telling the police that you had gotten it that day?
I was referring to the certified letter, not the notice that was on the front door.
But you do recall telling them that you received it on that day?
I do recall, I just listened to my 911 calls, that I did say that we found the car that day. And that was as a result of getting the notice from the tow company that our car was at Johnson's Towing.
Now, when you got the car and it was in the garage, it was your understanding that what you were smelling was garbage, was it not?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And you're clear about that,
Yes, sir.
okay? And the reason you said in the 911 tape that the car smelled like a dead body was because, can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury why?
I don't know why I said it that night. It just came out. Everything else I had thought about up until the third phone call. And the third phone call that I made to the 911, it just blurted out along with everything else.
The first time you called 911, you never told them about any dead body in your car.
I didn't have a relevance, or the car didn't enter my mind, except for the fact that I had asked Casey at one time to come home, and I told her to bring the car home. And when she didn't come home, I used that as an excuse to speak to the police.
You used what as an excuse to speak to the police?
The car that had been stolen.
Okay. My question to you is, in either the first or the second 911 call, did you ever tell them anything about the car smelling like a dead body?
No, I never referenced the smell of the car.
And have you ever testified that the reason you told them the car smelled like a dead body was because you wanted the police to get there right away?
I wanted the police to get there before I called them, yes.
My question is, have you ever testified that the reason you mentioned that the car smelled like a dead body was because the police were taking a long time to get there and you wanted them there right then and there?
Yes, sir.
Now, you said that you got the notice early around lunchtime. The letter, actually, knowing that the car was towed. Is that correct?
I never picked up the letter. George did.
George, you became aware of it.
Yes, before lunch.
And you, in fact, spoke to Casey on 12:47, 12:57, and 1:10 p.m. that afternoon, did you not?
I spoke with her and left messages for her during those times.
And
This would be a good time to break.
yes, sir.
Okay. Members of the jury, we're going to take our mid-afternoon recess to 3 o'clock. I'm going to ask you not to discuss the case among yourselves. It would be time for those who need to take the special recess to also take it also at this time. Any additional instructions on behalf of the state or the defense? Okay, we'll be in recess to 3 o'clock. Okay, let's have Ms. Anthony resume the stand. And let's return the jury. Okay, stay recognized presence of the jury.
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense.
Yes, sir.
All right, Mr. Baez, you may continue, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mrs. Anthony, I just wanted to, before I move on, I wanted to touch back on 2 points that I may have overlooked. The calls that you received from Casey on June 16, 2008 at 4 p.m., there were 6 calls within 4 minutes, were there not?
I don't recall, sir. I just know that when I came back out of the conference room, I had a voice message in my inbox, and the operator had told me that Casey had called, and I had some phone calls on my cell phone, some missed phone calls.
During the course of this case, you've come to know that there were actually 6 calls within 4 minutes, correct? Does that sound fair to you?
I never realized there were 6 until now, but yes, I knew there were several, more than 3 or 4.
Okay. One at 4:10, 4:11, 4:11, 4:13.
I'm going to object. Mr. Bias is testifying. The witness said she did not know.
Sustained.
Oh, hold on. Now, you work for Gentiva, is that correct?
Yes,
That's home health care?
yes.
And you have health insurance?
I had health insurance through there, yes.
Okay. Now, I'd like to talk about July 15th. That's where we were at before the break. I would, at this time, with the court's permission, like to play an item that's already in evidence, the third 911 call, a short portion of that. if I may.
Any objections from the state? You may proceed, Mr. Baez.
George, Karen, listen. Karen, listen. Casey said Danny took her a month ago. She was missing for a month. Okay,
That's the portion, I don't know if you caught that. Was that the portion where you told George about what was going on?
Yes, there's sometime during that period of time I had the phone in my hand waiting for the sheriff's office to come, and I saw George pull up, and when he got out of the car, I was trying to tell him at the same time talking to the dispatcher.
Okay, I'm going to play a little bit further back, a little longer. Another 5 seconds. Right there.
Date of birth. 8/9/2000. Oh God, she's 3. She's 2005. George, Karen, listen. Karen, listen. Casey said Danny took her a month ago. She was missing for a month. Okay, I need.
You don't hear George Anthony saying anything other than what on that tape, do you?
I was yelling to George as he was getting out of the car. He parked his car on the street, and I was still in the driveway, kind of close to the house.
Other than the word what, do you hear him say anything on that 911 tape?
I don't hear him say anything. I didn't hear him say anything.
Okay. Now, when you arrived home and you began to question Casey with Lee, only you and Lee were involved in that, correct?
Yes.
George was not involved in that.
No.
And George didn't question her in reference to any of this, did he?
I don't know if George ever had, or if George had contact with Casey, I wasn't aware.
So you're not aware if George had any contact with Casey when this all occurred?
Time frame, he was not home until that third 911 call, and then as he was coming home, then the sheriff's department arrived, so everything just happening, everybody converged all at once, and everything became a big, just jumble. Everybody was in the house at that point, and we
And
were
he-
all pushed aside.
And he never had the opportunity to question her, according.
As far as I know, no, because once the sheriff's office came, we were all separated.
Okay. Now, on your 911 tape, you state that Kaylee had been missing since June 7th. Is that correct?
Yes, I wasn't looking at a calendar, and I didn't reference Father's Day at that point. I just knew that it was a month, and
And that's even though if you count back 31 days from that date, it would have been June 16th.
probably, yes.
Now, you gave a sworn statement to law enforcement that evening. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Do you recall the date you gave for that statement?
Again, it was I wrote down the wrong Sunday. It was the Sunday before Father's Day, and I was not intending it to be that day. I did not realize. I just got my dates wrong.
I understand, but do you recall the date that you gave on that day?
Yeah, it was the
For that
Sunday
statement.
before Father's Day, so
What day do you recall that being?
be the 9th? No. The 7th, yes. The 7th.
7th. If I showed you your statement, would that refresh your recollection?
Yes, please.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may approach.
June 8th.
Does that refresh your recollection, ma'am?
Yes.
And what date did you put in your written statement?
June 8th, which would have been the Sunday before the 15th.
So in the 911 call, you mentioned it was the 7th. In your written statement, you write the 8th. Is that correct?
I don't know, if did I say June 7th on the 911 call?
Yes, if I showed you
Okay.
the transcript.
I don't want to hear it again.
Okay.
If that's what it was, then I did. Again, that last call, I was hysterical.
You later found out it was June 15th, was it not?
Yes,
And the way you found out was from law enforcement.
correct.
And that's because they took a look at the video of Kaylee with your father.
Correct.
And they then wanted to go and speak to people at the home where your father was at. Is that not correct?
Yeah, they wanted to verify that date.
And you did not want law enforcement to go speak with them at the home or to disturb your father.
I was concerned about my father, who was very ill at the time. I didn't want sheriff's deputies or anybody showing up at a nursing home upsetting him or my mother.
So the answer is yes, ma'am. You didn't want law enforcement to go and speak to anyone at the home or to your father.
Correct.
And your father is still alive today?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that evening, when police arrived, did you not tell the responding detective that Casey had issues with seizures?
Are we?
Relevancy?
We're discussing July 15th, Judge.
Sustain?
Ma'am, you testified that you are a registered nurse,
Yes, sir.
and are you currently working as a registered nurse?
No, sir.
And what are you doing for a living now?
Overall?
I'm on disability right now.
Okay. And that is as a result of this case?
Yes, sir.
Do you have a financial interest in this case?
No, sir, I do not.
Have you started an organization by the name of Kaylee Marie Foundation? Kaylee Marie Anthony Foundation.
Yes, sir.
Have you trademarked Kaylee's name?
Yes, our attorneys filed the correct paperwork for that, yes.
Have you made any money off of this case?
We've lost money off this case, sir. I've lost a lot off this case, sir.
Have you sold photographs of your daughter and your granddaughter for $20,000 to CBS in this case?
My old attorney, Brad Conway, set that up so that he could get paid.
And you paid him the entire $20,000?
No, a portion of that.
How much of that did you keep?
I had to pay bills with that. He got $6,000.
He got $6,000?
Yes, sir.
Have you discussed or flown to New York to discuss with anyone reference a book deal?
Again, that was set up through my ex-attorney, Brad Conway.
Did you go with him when he went to New York to try and arrange a book deal?
Yes,
Did your husband go with you?
yes.
Did anyone else go with you?
To our surprise, we met Tom Luca up there. We did not know he was going to be there.
And he is, he was your son's attorney.
Yes.
And was he trying to negotiate a book deal for your son?
No, sir, he was not.
What was he doing there?
I have no idea.
Have you attempted to earn a living as a director of the Kaylee Marie Anthony Foundation?
No, sir, have not.
Have you engaged in numerous fundraising activities for this foundation?
No, sir, we have not.
Has this foundation done anything?
Yes, sir, it has.
Okay. And do you currently have any negotiations with any media outlets in reference to future interviews or future projects involving this case?
No, sir, I do not.
Have you flown to New York to meet with ABC News?
Not for a long time.
How many networks have you flown to New York to discuss possible projects with?
The projects were already done. We went up there for the daytime events when Kaylee was still missing, and we went up there and did a 48-hour interview, and we have not been back since.
If I can have just one moment, Judge.
You may.
I have no further questions at this time.
You're right.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mrs. Anthony, you testified on cross-examination that Kaylee was always provided with food, clothing, and shelter, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Those were items provided by you. You provided food to your granddaughter, Kaylee, correct? Did you provide food for your granddaughter, Kaylee?
You can ask the question.
Okay. Yes, yes, ma'am, I did.
The clothing that Kaylee had, did you provide clothing for your granddaughter, Kaylee?
A lot of people provided clothing for Kaylee, but I was probably the primary person. Yes.
Okay. Did you like to spoil Kaylee with clothes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. The house where Kaylee lived, did you provide?
Just beyond the scope.
Over.
Did you provide the shelter for your granddaughter?
Yes, ma'am.
You are also asked during cross-examination about your daughter's weight as it exists today. You've come to many court proceedings over the course of the last almost 3 years, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And since July 15th of 2008, has your daughter's weight fluctuated while she's been incarcerated?
Yes, ma'am, it has.
When you found out that she was pregnant, you asked her who the father was, and she said Jesse Grund. Did you provide that information to your husband, George?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
When you had individuals associated with Greta Van Susteren at your residence, was that in August of 2008?
Probably yes.
Did you tell those individuals anything other than the gate had been opened on or about June 17th of 2008?
Yes, I discussed the fact that the gate was open and that I had discovered the pool had the ladder on it.
All right. Do you remember giving them a date more specific than June 17th or that week of 2008?
No, I just vaguely remember that conversation. It wasn't something that had a significant impact on me at that time.
Do you recall telling your coworkers, you mentioned Debbie Bennett, Debbie Polisano, would that also include Mr. Crittenden,
Yes, ma'am.
that the incident regarding the pool ladder and the gate was a few days before the gas can incident of June 24th?
Yes, it was prior to the gas can incident.
Okay. That gate that you have on the side of your house can only be opened from the inside, correct?
If it's locked, yes.
Were you in the habit of keeping it locked?
For the most part, unless we were using it frequently. Like if we were, working in the front yard, we wouldn't lock it every time we went out front. But yes, if we were gone, we usually lock the gate.
Okay. Can you provide any testimony as to whether or not the gate was locked from the inside on June 15th, 16th, 17th, or any time that week?
The only time I know the gate was not locked that I know for sure was the 16th when I found it was open. I had no reason to go over there after that Sunday, the 13th, when we were doing yard work.
So it could only be locked from the inside,
Correct.
and you didn't unlock it, correct?
Correct.
When you called George and asked about the gate and the pool incident, he didn't say he unlocked it.
No, ma'am, he did not.
Kaylee was unable to reach that lock or do that mechanism, correct?
Correct, it was too tall for her.
All right. And so who else does that leave in the house?
Casey.
When you told the people at work that it smelled like there was a dead body in the car, you referred to that as a manner of speech.
So,
I'm sorry.
When you told the people at work that the car smelled like there had been a dead body in it, you referred to that earlier as a manner of speaking, correct?
Correct.
And when you told the police that the car smelled like there was a dead body in it, it's your testimony that that was just to get them there faster, correct?
I wanted them there faster, so I said whatever came to my head.
Did you tell any of the people at your office that the car smelled like garbage?
I believe I told them that George and the tow driver had pulled a bag of garbage out and the car had been sitting there in the hot sun since June 30th, or probably before when Casey left it at Amscott, so I'd never smelled anything that was left in a car that long.
All right. But when you were talking to them about it, you used the words dead body, correct?
Correct, because
Same words you used with law enforcement, correct? In the
correct.
911 call.
correct.
Did that car smell like a dead body?
That car smelled like something I had never smelled before.
Worse than the experience that you had with rotting flesh in your employment?
I would say so because it was just a bigger surface.
Now, when you were played a section of the 911 calls, the 911 call that you made, and you described your husband, George, coming up as you were on the phone, what did he say?
I can't remember what he said. I just remember being hysterical and running to him and pretty much collapsing. I almost went all the way down into the driveway, and I remember him picking me up.
All right. Did he appear to be upset to you?
Yes, he was quite upset.
Did he have a reaction similar to yours?
Yes.
And shortly after your husband arrived, law enforcement arrived and separated you all?
Yes, it was within seconds.
The copywriting or trademarking of your granddaughter's name, is that to prevent the exploitation of Kaylee Marie Anthony by strangers?
Yes, ma'am.
During your cross-examination, you told us about Zanny and Jeff Hopkins and other elaborate lies told to you by your daughter. Those lies began after Kaylee was born, didn't they?
Yes, ma'am.
And those lies were always in the context of either who was caring for Kaylee or why Casey wasn't home. Is that correct?
Not necessarily, because Jeff Hopkins' name came up, it was more about a discussion Casey and I had about Jessie and her relationship.
So aside from that one, somebody who was a potential suitor, the elaborate lies that you've detailed for us,
Ma'am, listen closely to the question. Do not answer the question until I tell you to answer it.
other than those, did the elaborate lies center around who was caring for Kaylee?
It was also regarding her employment and everything else. So it was,
Or why Casey wasn't at home?
yes. Yes.
That's all the follow-up I had. Thank you, Your Honor.
Mrs. Anthony, you stated that the car had smelled nothing like you had smelled before.
Correct.
And what you had smelled before was dead bodies, correct?
The car was overwhelming. It smelled different than I had smelled garbage or dead bodies.
So it smelled like something completely different.
The closest thing that I could resemble it to would be rotting flesh.
Okay. And did you call the police when you smelled this rotting flesh in your home?
I did not believe it was rotting flesh.
And that's because you believed it to be garbage.
Yes, sir.
Now, you mentioned during the 911 call under cross or redirect that George's reaction was similar to yours, correct?
George was visibly upset after he picked me up and I started hugging him. He started to cry and weep as much as I did.
My question, ma'am, is you testified that his reaction was similar to yours.
Yes.
And we could hear your reaction on that 911 tape, could we not?
Yes.
We did not hear George's reaction on that 911 tape, did we?
Because George was quite a ways away at that point.
My question is, we did not hear George's reaction on that 911 tape, did we?
No, sir.
Now, Ms. Drain Burdick, during redirect, mentioned that all of these lies began when Kaylee was born. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Do you recall Casey's graduation?
Yes.
And you had a party planned and a big celebration for her high school graduation.
Yes.
You invited people.
Yes.
And what happened on Casey's graduation day?
Well, prior to Casey's graduation day, we got a word from her guidance counselor that she was shy 1/2 credit of her necessary credit. She had actually more credits than she needed to graduate, but she was missing a quarter makeup English that we thought she had finished.
And if it weren't for this phone call that you received on the 11th hour, you would have had this party.
We would have gone to graduation.
And Casey would have walked up to get her diploma, and they would have stopped her and said, hey.
It wasn't the 11th hour, sir. We knew the day before, but we had already planned everything. So they said she was going to graduate. She was just not allowed to walk for graduation, so we carried on with the party.
The day before Casey graduated from high school, you had an entire party planned, but if it wasn't for that phone call, you were all going to go to the graduation.
Correct.
Enough further questions. And that was before Kaylee was born, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, may the witness stand down. Yes, Your Honor, subject to recall. Okay, ma'am, you may stand down. Okay, state me call the next witness.
State call Amy Huizinga.
My name is Amy Huizinga. It's AMYHUIZENGA.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Judge. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Hi.
Ms. Huizinga, how old are you?
I am 26 years old.
Are you employed?
I am.
What do you do?
I work backstage in the theater aboard a cruise ship.
Do you know Casey Anthony?
I did.
Well, when did you first meet Ms. Anthony?
I truly met her for the first time New Year's Eve going into 2008.
Did there come a time that your relationship became close?
Yes, it did, around February of that year.
Would you consider yourselves back in that time period one of her best friends?
Very, very close friends, yes.
Do you know Ricardo Morales?
Yes.
How do you know Ricardo?
He's one of my best friends.
Attorneys approach the bench. You may proceed.
Thank you, Judge. Ms. Huizinga, back in January, February, March of 2008, how were you employed?
I was working at the Orlando Repertory Theater as a backstage technician and also at Houlihan's serving tables.
During this time frame, were you under the impression that the defendant also had a job?
I was.
What job was that?
She was an events coordinator at Universal Studios.
Did you ever see any type of identification that she had that would show that she worked at Universal?
I don't believe so.
During January, February, March of 2008, did you spend a lot of time with the defendant?
A fair amount.
Per week, how many times do you think you would see her?
Probably like once or twice when she and Ricardo had started dating.
How about other types of communication? Did you email each other?
Yeah, well, not email. We text messaged a lot. We talked on the phone, over instant message, MySpace.
Would you characterize that as almost at least a daily occurrence?
Yes.
Now, the times that would you hang out after work?
Yes.
At the time, with whom were you living?
I was at that time living with Troy Brown, and for a little while, Lauren. I'm sorry, I'm not going to remember her last name right now. She had moved out in that time period, but so Troy Brown consistently through then.
During this time period, did you see Kaylee Anthony?
Yes.
Would you see her on a regular basis?
Most of the time, she would be in bed by the time I got off work. But if Casey was there, Kaylee was over at Ricardo and JP's, which is where I mostly saw her.
Were there times during this period where you all had made plans to go out on a typical Friday or Saturday night, including the defendant?
Yes.
Were there ever times during this time period where the defendant could not go?
Yes.
Why?
Something would come up with her mom watching Kaylee, and she wouldn't be able to go because there was no one to watch her.
Were there times that the defendant would bring Kaylee over anyway?
Yes.
On those occasions, what would y'all do?
We would hang out. Casey would either put Kaylee to bed up in Ricardo's room or on the couch at a reasonable hour, sometimes a little bit longer so we could play with her for a little bit. She'd put her to bed, and then we'd hang out.
During this time frame, again, going to January, February, March, approximately how many times, if you know, was the defendant unable to hang out with you or to do things with you because of Kaylee?
Objection, relevance.
Overruled.
It would, I'd say around once a weekend. There'd be, or once a week at least, that there'd be something that would be planned that, or we'd talk about making plans and we couldn't make plans because it couldn't happen.
Okay. You were aware, or did you become aware that when the defendant and Ricardo broke up?
It was a really messy off again, on again breakup, but yeah, I was aware of all the steps along the way.
Okay. You were aware of that from the defendant?
Yes.
Were you also being made aware of that by Ricardo?
Not as detailedly, but I was aware of it.
In May of 2008, were they broken up?
That was the off again, on again period.
During this time period, what was your living situation?
Excuse me?
What was your living situation?
I was still living with Troy Brown.
Did there come a time in May of 2008 when you were starting to look for another place to live?
Yes.
Did you have anything specifically in mind?
I had planned on living with Casey.
Okay. When did you all start talking about doing that?
Around mid-May, when we found out that the house that I was living in with Troy was going to be sold, and I didn't know where to go.
Okay. What did you and the defendant do in order to facilitate moving in together?
Talked about stuff a lot. It was all verbal that we had talked about finding an apartment, and then we were going to move into a house.
Was there ever a time during May of 2008 where you guys, either one of you, would find a house and you'd go and look at it?
There was an appointment made for an apartment that I was told about, and I don't quite recall the reason why we couldn't go, but that it wasn't going to work out.
Okay. Why wasn't it? Well, who decided it wasn't going to work out?
Casey, she was the one who had done the research.
Did this happen on more than one occasion?
With the various things that we were going to live in, yes.
Okay. When you say the various things we were going to live in, are you referring to different apartments?
No, there was a time when she had told me that she was going to be taking over the mortgage payments of her parents' house, and that we could just move in there, and there was a room that I could live in there.
Was there a time frame put on when you might be able to move into her parents' home?
It was early July, I want to say. Maybe late June.
Did you express any interest in meeting her parents?
Yes,
How did you tell her that? Or how did you express that?
that I really wanted to meet her mom. I'm not 100%. I kind of think that there was one time when she was going to go to see one of the places with us, and I was really excited to meet her because I was going to be living with her daughter and her granddaughter, and I thought she would want to meet me, and it seemed natural that I would want to meet her.
Were there ever any plans in May of 2008 to actually meet?
No specific plans to meet her mom.
During this time period in May, did the defendant ever relate to you issues or problems that she was having with her mother as it related to Kaylee?
Only when Casey would think that Cindy was going to be watching Kaylee and then wasn't going to be able to, so then she would not be able to go out.
Okay. Did this happen on a frequent basis during this time period?
Fairly.
During this period in May of 2008, was it happening more that you were being told, at least, that Mrs. Anthony could not take care of Kaylee than it was happening back in January, February, and March of 2008?
Yes, and the frustration was greater.
Okay. What was your phone number back during this time period?
Excuse me?
Your phone number back
It
during
was-
this time period?
It was 954-328-9214.
I have a second, Judge. May I approach the witness, Judge?
You may.
Ms. Huizinga, I'm showing you what's been previously marked for identification MP. First of all, do you recognize the phone number, the phone number that appears on that piece of paper?
I'm guessing it's Casey's. I had it programmed in my phone.
Okay. Looking at that, can you see the message that appears on there?
Yes.
All right. Do you recognize that message?
It seems like a very familiar message that I probably got a couple times.
Okay. Who did you get that message from?
Most definitely from Casey.
Later on, after July 15th of 2008, did you have the opportunity to give your cell phone to law enforcement?
Yes, I volunteered it to them.
Okay. The text message that appears there, well, first of all, does that text message appear to be a true and accurate text message that you received from the defendant on May 3rd of 2008?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would move what's been previously marked for identification MP into evidence as the state's next in line.
What says the defense?
We would object under 403, relevance, and improper authentication.
Objection overruled. It will be received in evidence as states numbered.
Thank you, Judge. May I publish this thing?
After you retrieve it and give it to the clerk to have it remarked.
All right, can you blow that for me a little bit?
Can't see it.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right. What time did this text message, what time did you receive that text message?
At 11:10 p.m.
All right, and what does that message say?
Downtown tomorrow, my mom owes me.
And at 11:12:32, what is the next text message that you received from the defendant?
This week I'm there, no way I'm staying home.
All right. During this time period in May, when you read the words "my mom owes me," did you know what she was talking about?
That to watch Kaylee.
Why did she owe her?
Never really knew.
Okay. Were there times?
Move to strike, false for speculation. And based on the
Overruled. She
witness's
said
answer,
she
it's
didn't.
all-
She said she didn't know, so she didn't answer the question.
You had previously testified that there were times that the defendant had made plans with you only to cancel them, correct?
Correct.
And why did she cancel those plans?
Because her mom wasn't watching Kaylee.
The messages that we see here, is this a recurrent theme in May of 2008?
Correct.
Did the defendant tell you anything about her relationship with her mother during this time period?
It was strained. It was hard. Her mom was being continually agitated with her.
Did she tell you why her mother was continually agitated with her?
I remember there was a time when she told me that her mom had told her that she was an unfit mother. She was extremely upset about that, and she didn't really know why her mom had said those things.
Hearsay.
Overruled.
Was this a topic of conversation on a regular basis during this time period?
Her frustration with her mother, yes.
Did you ever overhear any arguments between the two of them, or at least while the defendant was on the phone with her mother during this time period?
Beginnings or ends of the conversation, yes.
And after those conversations ended, what would she say, or did she say anything about the relationship with her mom?
Just that her mom was crazy and she was just really frustrated and that she needed space and she didn't understand why she couldn't understand that.
All right, let's move into June of 2008. Did there come a time that you moved in with Ricardo?
Yes.
When did that occur?
That occurred, I believe, June 5th, 6th. I had wrecked my car and they lived close to where I worked, so I moved in with them so I could walk to work.
I'll just call it the beginning of June.
Yes.
Okay. Who else was living at this place with Ricardo?
Ricardo Morales and JP Chat. It's JP Chat's place.
You said that you had wrecked your car.
Yes.
Where did you wreck your car?
On my way home from downtown, I fell asleep.
Did that necessitate you having to get another car?
Yes.
What plans did you make to get another car?
Casey was going to give me a ride to Jacksonville so I could purchase a car from my uncle.
What time was the defendant going to pick you up?
It was extremely early in the morning.
Do you recall the date?
June 13th?
On June 3rd, that's the day that you were supposed to go to Jacksonville.
Yes.
Did the defendant come pick you up on June 13th of 2008?
No, she did not.
What happened?
I texted
Overruled.
her just to confirm, make sure she was awake because it was early.
When did you text her, that morning or the night?
That morning.
Okay.
Just to make sure she hadn't overslept. And she texted back that there were some family problems and that she was going to the hospital with her dad.
Did she tell you in any way what the problem was with her dad?
Relevance.
Sustained.
When you received that message, what did you do?
I looked for a rental car or some other way to get up to Jacksonville.
And did you go?
Yes.
Later on that day of the 13th, did you hear in any form of communication from the defendant?
I did.
And what was the nature of that communication?
We spoke up on the phone when I had gotten to Jacksonville. She wanted to let me know what had happened with her dad. And then,
Relevance.
Don't tell us what happened to her dad, but continue.
just to kind of check in.
Okay. Later on, did you hear from her some more? Again?
I did.
And in relation to what?
She wanted me to come to Fusion that evening.
Did you return from Jacksonville that night?
Yes.
Did you go to Fusion
No.
later on? Okay.
You're shaking your
It was a no. Sorry, I thought I spoke.
Okay. Now, during this time period, were you looking for different types of work? Or a different job?
I was not at that time, no. Well, I will take that back. I work in theater. You're continually looking for work. So I was trying to find jobs at various places. It wasn't an active, I needed a job.
Okay. Did you ever ask the defendant for assistance in that regard?
Yes.
What did you ask her?
She worked at, well, I thought she worked at Universal Studios. I really wanted to work at Universal Studios. So I gave her my resume and was hoping she could bring it to someone for me.
How did you give her your resume? In other
I
words,
emailed her my resume.
do you recall when you did that?
No.
Okay. Did you see the defendant on June 13th? After you came back from Jacksonville?
I don't believe so.
Was there a period of time during the month of June of 2008 when you didn't see her at all?
Yes.
Do you recall how long that time period was?
About 3 weeks.
During this 3 weeks when you did not see her, did you stay in contact with her?
Yes.
Again, would this be through either telephone calls or text messages?
Correct.
During this time period when you didn't actually see her but spoke with her, did you become aware from the defendant that she was having car trouble?
Yes.
What can you tell the jury about what she told you about that?
She had gotten a few flat tires one night. There were 2 individual occurrences of her running out of gas, and there was also an extremely bad smell from her car.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Ms. Huizinga, I'm showing you what's been previously marked for identification MQ. Again, do you recognize the text message or the message that appears on that exhibit?
Yes.
Who was that message from?
From Casey Anthony.
Does that appear to be a true and accurate text message or a copy of the text message that you received from her?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would move what's been previously marked for identification MQ into evidence as the state's next in line.
What says the defense?
No objections, Judge.
It will be received in evidence as states numbered.
Now, Your Honor, may I publish this?
You may.
All right, Ms. Huizinga, this text message is dated 6/27,
Correct.
and what does she write to you?
There was definitely part of a dead animal plastered to the frame of my car.
All right, let's stop there for a second. Prior to receiving this text message, had you had various or phone conversations with the defendant regarding the smell in the car?
Yes.
Over what span of days?
She remarked that there was a really bad smell coming out of her car and she didn't know what it was. And then there was another phone call where she said it had gotten worse and she thought maybe her dad had run over something when he had borrowed the car.
Okay. When she first told you about the smell of the car, approximately how many days before you received this text message did you first hear about the smell in the car?
It was within a week, maybe slightly less.
And what is the first thing you remember her actually saying about the smell in the car?
She said something smelled really bad. I don't remember any specific words.
She didn't have an explanation for it at that time.
No.
So the next time you hear about the smell in the car, is it the same day or the next day?
It's probably the next day or the day after that. There was a little bit of time in between.
And the next time she tells you about the smell in the car, what does she say about it?
That it had gotten worse and her idea that perhaps it was something that had gotten run over.
That's something, maybe something that got run over?
Yeah.
Did you ever suggest to her that she check?
No.
Okay. The next time that you actually had a conversation about the smell in the car, when was that?
It was this.
Okay.
It was the two conversations, and the text message was the end of the story.
All right. When moving on to, again, the first text message that we see here is stamped 11:34 a.m.
Yes.
Now we get to 11:49. The text message that she sends to you is, "My car ran out of gas again."
Correct.
All right. When was the first time you had heard about her car running out of gas?
I think it was about a week before.
Did she tell you where she ran out of gas?
I don't remember.
Did you ask, at that time, the first time that she ran out of gas, did she ask you for any assistance?
No.
Then we go down approximately, 10 minutes later or so, 9 minutes later, you received another text message. 2 weeks in a row on a Friday. "My stupid car runs out of gas. Wow." The second time, did she tell you where she ran out of gas?
It was she had parked her car at an Amscot and that she had left it there and was hoping it wouldn't get towed.
Did you have any subsequent phone conversation with her after these text messages about getting her car some gas?
Probably in the midst of conversation.
Was there a time period that she came, more or less, did she start staying with you?
Yes.
When was that?
That was June 30th.
How did that happen?
She knocked on the door really early in the morning and said she was there and then didn't leave.
Were you expecting her?
No, I was asleep.
You knew or did you know that she was dating somebody at the time?
Yes.
Were you aware through talking with her that this boyfriend was leaving town?
Yes.
Did you have any idea where the defendant was staying during this time period?
I figured that she was staying with Tony, but I didn't know for sure.
Did she ever at any time during this time period tell you that she was staying exclusively with Tony?
No.
Or that she had not been home?
Not that she had not been home. Like, not those words were never specifically said. It was implied, but not said.
Okay. Again, during this time period at the end of June, do you recall the defendant talking about any strife or problems with her mother?
Yes, but not any more than usual.
When she spoke about her mother during this time period, what was her demeanor?
Not very happy with her.
Okay. Was she angry?
More frustrated.
What did she tell you about the problem that she was having with her mom?
There weren't a lot of specifics. Most of them had to do with Kaylee. And
what do you recall the problems or the issue being about Kaylee?
in that time period, it was that Cindy wanted to see Kaylee, and Casey was keeping her away because there was stuff going on at home, and she was trying to keep him out of that situation.
So the defendant told you that.
I apologize, Mr. George. Are you going to refer to this any longer?
No, I'm sorry. I'll take it out. During this time period in June, when you were speaking with her, did she inform you that she was keeping Kaylee from her mom?
Yes.
Why was she keeping Kaylee from her mom?
There was, George and Cindy were having problems at home, and she wanted to keep Kaylee out of the drama.
Did she tell you what the problems that George and Cindy were having at home?
She told me they were considering divorce.
Did she tell you why divorce was a consideration?
That her dad had cheated on her mom.
Was this the first time during this time period, was this the first time that you had heard that there was, from the defendant, that there was the possibility of divorce between the two of them?
I don't remember exactly.
And because, explain again, or explain what that potential pending divorce had to do with Kaylee.
It was the not happiness at home that Casey wanted to keep her from, is what I had gotten out of it.
Was there also any conversation about needing space?
Yes.
Okay. What do you recall the defendant telling you about needing or wanting her space?
And it also had to do with her wanting to move out. It was time for them to have their lives and be away from her parents. Grow up, that's what you want to do.
Did the defendant ever tell you that she resented her parents?
I don't think resentment would be the word.
What would be the word?
I think there were frustrations and unhappiness and obvious problems. But resentment goes really deep. I don't think it was quite that deep.
During this time period in June, are you still working or thinking that you're going to be moving into this home?
Correct.
Again, you're still planning on the beginning of July.
Yes. Well, there were many dates set that didn't happen.
Okay. How many different dates were set?
At least 2. There's definitely one where I almost got a moving truck. Like I had looked up all the prices and arranged people to help me move.
When was that?
That was in June at some point.
And when those moving dates were set, were they canceled?
Yes.
Who canceled them?
Casey.
The first time they were canceled, why were they canceled?
I remember some of the reasons, just not which order they came in. There was one time when landscaping needed to be done. There was, just various issues with the house that she said George wanted to fix up before it was ours. There was one time when she had said there were like 20 people over and she didn't know what was, when it was going to be done. So we had to do it at a different time.
Was there ever a time that the defendant told you that the house was not going to be available?
No. Oh, yeah, no, I'm sorry. I take that back. I apologize.
It's okay.
Yes.
When was that?
I don't remember exactly when, but she had said that Cindy took back the deal. That Bank of America had this 30-day policy where the paperwork that had been signed could be undone. None of the words really made sense to me at the time. And that then it wasn't happening, which added to the frustration with her mother.
Did she tell you why? Or were you given a reason why Cindy went back on the deal?
I don't remember. I may have been.
Do you recall approximately, was this still in June or was this in July when this happened?
This was in July.
When speaking about her mother, you had used the word. I'm sorry. What adjectives did the defendant use to describe her mom during this time period?
Mainly crazy.
Did she say why?
Not in words that I could really recall. She talked a lot. But it was just a lot of, just normal child complaining about parent stuff. But a lot of to do with Kaylee.
Just seeing her? Where Cindy wanted to see her? Or was
Wanted
it
to see her, and then like frustrations of the past with their relationship. And
what was the problem with the past?
This entire line of questioning is purely speculative and move to strike based on speculation.
And these are, I'm sorry.
Mr. George?
These are statements made by the defendant.
I don't believe these are statements attributed to Miss Anthony as much as they are these witnesses' interpretations of what some
That's
of
the
what
last
she
question,
said.
Mr. Stein.
Thank you, Judge. All right, so the defendant shows up at your door
yes,
on June 30th.
that's correct.
Did she tell you that she needed to stay with you?
No,
Okay. Did she wind up staying with you?
yes,
For how long?
about a week.
Did she come with luggage?
She had stuff in Tony's car. She never so much brought it in like she was going to be staying there long term. It wasn't my place.
Okay. Did you have any problem with her staying?
Only in so much as it wasn't my place and I couldn't allow her to stay. And I didn't like that.
Do you know who William Waters is?
Yes.
Who is he?
He was a friend of mine.
Did you attend a 4th of July party at William Waters' house?
Yes.
Was this a party that you had known was coming up?
Yes, I helped plan it.
You helped plan it?
Yes,
Did you invite the defendant to that party?
I did.
When did you invite her initially?
Probably around a week to 5 days beforehand.
When you invited her, or at least told her about this party, what did she tell you in response to being able to attend?
She wouldn't be able to come.
Did she tell you why she couldn't come?
Kaylee.
What did she say about Kaylee?
That she was going to be with her and wouldn't be able to come.
When she told you that, did you have a suggestion for her?
I said she should bring Kaylee. Kids are fun at barbecues.
What did she say in response to that?
She said she'd think about it.
Now, during this period that she's staying with you, do you ask her where Kaylee is?
I never had to. She always had an explanation as to where Kaylee was.
Okay. Where was Kaylee?
She was at the beach with the nanny and her mom. She was at theme parks. She was pretty much doing a tour of Florida. There was Busch Gardens at some point.
So did you and the defendant go to William Waters' party?
Yes.
During the course of that get-together or that party, did you ask or did you ask any more about Kaylee?
She told me, I again, didn't have to ask. She told me that Kaylee was at SeaWorld with the nanny.
July 5th.
Yes.
Do you remember that day?
Yes.
Why?
Because I got woke up by a lot of tapping fingernails on a computer.
And when you woke up, who was on the computer?
Casey.
How would you describe her demeanor?
She was extremely happy because Tony was going to be coming home that day.
Did she leave? I guess it's your residence. Did she leave where you were living on the 5th?
Yes.
Do you know where she went when she left?
Fairly certain she hung out with Will for the rest of the day. I had to work and then went to the airport to go pick up Tony.
You had mentioned a few minutes ago that when she appeared at your house on the 30th, she was driving Tony's car.
Correct.
Did she tell you what the status of her car was?
That it was in the shop.
Now, did you have a trip planned during the month of July of 2008?
I did.
Where did you go?
Puerto Rico.
Do you recall what date that you left?
I left July 8th, I believe.
Who else went?
I met with JP Chat, Ricardo Morales joined us, and then Troy joined us.
Was this a trip that had been planned in advance, far in advance?
Far in advance, yes.
Was there a time period in 2008 where the defendant was also going to Puerto Rico with you?
She wanted to, yes.
When did you learn that she ultimately was not going to go?
After we left. She was still hoping she could somehow work it out. It obviously seemed like it wasn't going to happen, but
What do you recall her having to work out in order for her to go to Puerto Rico?
someone to watch Kaylee.
And was it your understanding she was unable to find anybody to do that?
I believe so.
Your Honor, may counsel approach?
You may. You may proceed.
Thank you. Ms. Huizinga, you went to Puerto Rico.
Yes.
What date did you come back?
I came back July 15th.
When you came back, who picked you up at the airport?
Casey Anthony.
What car did she pick you up in?
Mine.
When she picked, what kind of car did you have at the time?
It's a red Toyota Corolla.
Big car, small car?
Very little. Well, I mean, little, but
Did the people that you went to Puerto Rico with, did they all come back on the same flight?
yes,
Did you give or did she give everybody a ride back?
we couldn't all fit.
Okay, so who went home first?
I went home, I took Casey back to Tony's, and then came to pick up the boys.
After you got home and back to your apartment, did you do anything else?
I left with JP to go to the Florida Mall.
Why did you go to the Florida Mall?
The iPhone 3GS, I think it was that year, had come out while we were gone, and JP really, really, really wanted it, so we went there to get that.
While you were at the mall, did you receive a phone call?
I did.
Who did you receive a phone call from?
Cindy Anthony.
Without detailing or talking about what she told you, what can you tell the jury about her demeanor while you spoke with her?
Very, very, very scared.
Had you ever spoken to her before?
I had not.
When you first started speaking with her, what was your initial reaction?
Surprise. I'd never spoken to her.
Were you afraid to speak with her?
Cautious. Not afraid, just cautious.
Why were you cautious?
Casey told me she was crazy.
After that conversation, did you meet Mrs. Anthony?
I did.
Where did you meet her?
She came and picked me up from the Florida Mall
When she came to pick you up, why did she pick you up?
because I needed to take her to Casey.
Did she tell you what had been going on in her life over the last month?
Yes,
Did you know how to get to Tony's house?
I did.
Did you take her to Tony's house?
I did.
Did you and Mrs. Anthony discuss what you would do once you got there?
We did.
What was the decision or what was the plan?
That I would knock on the door, have Casey come out, and then Cindy could confront her.
And is that what you did?
Yes.
When you knocked on the door, who answered the door?
They said it was open, so I had to open it.
When you opened it, did you actually walk into the apartment?
I did not.
And when you opened the apartment, did you see the defendant?
I did.
What was she doing?
She was sitting on the couch.
And what did you do or say to her when you saw her?
I motioned for her to come out. I'm pretty sure I told her just to come out.
Did she?
Yes.
Now, when she came out, where was Cindy Anthony
Just
in relation to the door?
Not too terribly far away. The landing was only 12 to 15 feet long anyway. Long and far enough to weigh far enough out of eyesight so she would actually come out, but close enough where she could get there fast.
How would you describe Mrs. Anthony's demeanor when you got to the apartment?
Very confrontational.
Angry?
Yeah.
So when the defendant comes out of the apartment, what is the first thing you see or hear?
A massive explosion of mother and daughter. And just, I was a little scared and really kind of tried to close myself off as much. I was caught in the middle of it for a while. and then managed to escape. But a lot of confrontation and defense.
What was the first question you heard Mrs. Anthony ask Casey?
Fairly certain she asked where Kaylee was.
What was her response?
She's with the nanny.
Sustained.
All right. What did the defendant say in response to this question?
She's with the nanny.
Did the defendant agree to take Mrs. Anthony to Kaylee?
With a very, very big amount of persuasion.
Objection, judgment, strike based on hearsay.
Overruled.
You said that there was a mother-daughter confrontation.
Yes.
Was the defendant at any time during this initial confrontation defensive?
Objection, judge, calls for speculation.
Sustained.
I'll rephrase it. What was the defendant's demeanor towards her mother at this stage?
So I'm trying to figure out the right phrasing. Defensive, but not in a backed off way, in a confrontational defensive. Like she was defending her position, but was meeting Cindy in the middle as far as aggression went.
Was she giving as good as she got?
Yes.
Did Casey want to leave that apartment?
No.
Objection, judge, calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Did the defendant ever say that she was not leaving the apartment?
I don't recall hearing those words because I was trying to get away from it.
Okay. Did you ever walk in? Did you see the defendant and Cindy Anthony walk back into the apartment?
I did not. I had gone downstairs at that point.
Did they come back out?
They had to have.
Okay. When they got out of the apartment, where'd they go?
We went back to the car.
Where are you sitting?
Pardon?
Where are you sitting in the car?
I was in the back seat,
Where's the defendant?
in the front seat.
Are they speaking, or is the defendant speaking to her mother while you're being driven home?
No.
She doesn't say anything?
Only if told, asked again where Kaylee was. She's with the nanny.
Objection, judge, move to strike all hearsay.
Overruled. Untimely.
Pretty much the same conversation going in a circle. There were a lot of accusations from Cindy to Casey. Most of her responses were crossed arms and a glaring look.
The defendant's arms are crossed.
Yes. She kind of looked like she was 16 and gotten caught in doing something bad.
Objection, judge, move to strike non-responsive.
Sustained. Motion to strike granted. Jurors to disregard the last comment by the witness.
Did you ever hear the defendant, while in the car, talk about space?
Probably all of the things said between the car ride and the confrontation outside kind of all mushed together.
What do you recall the defendant saying about space?
That she and Kaylee needed their space.
Thank you. I have no further questions at this time, Judge.
Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the time is now approximately 5 minutes to the hour 5. I'll probably be a little longer cross-examination other than 5 minutes. So I'm going to let you go for the evening. Some of you have requested copies of the St. Petersburg Times. Is that correct? Okay. We've had conversation with the St. Pete Times. We will be able to provide you with copies, but they will be edited. So anything in relationship to this case will be taken out. So if there are holes in your newspaper, they are shipping, I believe, the back copies from this weekend. So you should have those either sometime tomorrow, Wednesday, or the day after that. Okay? Please remember my previous admonitions. Do not discuss this case among yourselves, along with other admonitions. Members of the jury, you're here excused for the evening. You may be seated. Besides thinking you can stand down, you need to be back here tomorrow, probably about 8:45, so we can start promptly with your cross-examination tomorrow at 9 a.m. Okay. Okay. Anything else on behalf of the state of Florida
Defense, sir.
and the defense? Okay. Thank you.